Hello, AJ here. Welcome back to Art Isn't Easy. So, I want to address something really fast. So, the other day I got this comment on one of my videos. It was actually my video for the best films of 1960, and it was someone who was rather repulsed by what I posted. First of all, they claimed that the fact that I have this Paris, Texas poster in the background is me trying to claim that I want to show that I have good taste in film. For the record, I'm not trying to claim that I'm better than anyone. It just so happens that that is one of my favorite films, and I love the image of Nastasia Kinski, and I wanted to have it on my wall, and I thought that a movie poster, not to mention Parasite back there, just thought it'd be like a nice little thing in the background. I didn't think it was going to be a subject of some kind of like virtual hanging. So, needless to say, I doubt that guy's going to come back and watch this video. Let's go ahead and get started because we've already done 1960 and 1961, so we are going to move to 1962. 1962 is actually a year that is pretty epic in a lot of ways. It has been named one of the best years for cinema in history, and I can understand that thought process. I will say there is a year coming up that I prefer a lot more, but there are some doozies here for 1962. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to name five honorable mentions and then go into the top 10. So, at number 15 on my honorable mentions is a film by J. Lee Thompson, and that is Cape Fear. So most people remember Cape Fear from the 1991 remake by Martin Scorsese. And there is about to be a limited series on Apple TV with Amy Adams, Patrick Wilson, and I believe it's Javier Bardem playing Max Cady. Now, in the remake, that was Robert De Niro, but in this original, it is Robert Mitchum. Robert Mitchum was a very interesting actor. I always loved seeing him play such sinister roles. I always think of Night of the Hunter, for example. But Cape Fear is essentially about, well, if any of you have seen the Simpsons episode where Sideshow Bob follows the Simpsons, or as they're called at that point, the Thompsons, into witness protection, trying to kill Bart. That episode actually mostly mirrors the Scorsese version, but that's a brilliant episode. Everyone should check that out. But yes, Cape Fear is a horror classic. But next up at number 14, we have a film that I would argue does border on melodrama, but it has its great selling points, and primarily its solid direction by Blake Edwards, and also its two leads, Jack Lemmon and Lee Remick, and that is Days of Wine and Roses. Now, this one is mostly known for being the alcoholism film. And also, Blake Edwards is interesting too, because he is most known for films like Pink Panther, Breakfast at Tiffany's, like Victor Victoria, very like opulent, like silly films a lot of the time. But every now and then he would take like a little dive into like a darker, like traumatic territory. And here you have Jack Lemmon meeting this woman, and that's the Lee Remick character, and he introduces her to a life of social drinking. And she has some Brandy Alexanders at a party, which those are awesome, by the way. Not doing like don't drink responsibly. Okay. So she drinks these Brandy Alexanders, grows to love it, and the two of them essentially become full blown alcoholics. He recovers, but then she's kind of left in the gutter. Now, like I said, the film does flirt with being a little bit melodramatic, but the two of them in particular, like Lee Remick was part of that amazing Best Actress lineup from that year, which we will be going into that a little bit more because that's juicy. So, yes, I do feel like it is worth seeing. Now, at number 13, we have a truly great acting showcase, and it was a film adaptation of the play The Miracle Worker, which was a big success for Anne Bancroft and Patty Duke, who both won Oscars for their performances. Now, Miracle Worker was the story of Helen Keller and then her mentor, Anne Sullivan. And I do think that it's not exactly a masterpiece, in my opinion, but watching it for those two actresses is well worth your time. So I would say that it's a classic for a reason. Now at number 12, we have another film from the French New Wave, which is very dominant in this period, and that is Francois Truffaut's Jules and Jim. So this one, I will say, Truffaut has made some films I truly love. As some of you who might have been watching these videos know, I do adore the 400 Blows. I'm also a huge fan of Truffaut's Day for Night, which is from the 70s. He's made some very good films, but Jules and Jim, I would say, is a film that I do really like, but I wouldn't say I love it as much as some might do. But I will say that this was a great debut of sorts for Jeanne Moreau, who is very enchanting in her role as Catherine. And then at number 11, we have Akira Kurosawa again with Sanjuro. And this was a sequel to Yojimbo, which I talked about on my last video. And I would say that it's not really like it's probably a little bit lesser in comparison to Yojimbo, but it's Kurosawa. You can't really go wrong with him. Now we're going to come to the top 10, and we have a little bit of a doozy here. So we have Robert Aldrich's Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. So I did mention Juicy earlier with when I talked about the best actress lineup. I feel like it's been talked about to death, and odds are, if you're watching this video, you probably already know the story about Betty Davis and Joan Crawford and Anne Bancroft winning. So I won't go into that too much here, but let's just say that the combative nature between Betty Davis and Joan Crawford certainly helped make this movie a lot what it is. And as some of you probably do know, the film is about a child actress from vaudeville, Baby Jane, that's Betty Davis, but her sister is often overlooked. But as Baby Jane gets older, this sister Blanche, that's Joan Crawford, she ends up having a substantial screen acting career, whereas Baby Jane kind of falls by the wayside. But then when Blanche is confined to a wheelchair and Jane has to take care of her, let's just say that it's not exactly comforting for old Blanche. And also, Betty Davis's performance in this is quite possibly the definitive camp performance, camp horror. This was the film that started the rather unfortunate hagsploitation genre that like took actresses of a certain age and would put them in a horror film, basically like mocking the fact that they were like getting older and unappealing, which is honestly just a horrendous thing. Because like you have Betty Davis and Joan Crawford. I mean, I'm not the biggest Joan Crawford fan, but Betty Davis was a phenomenal, stellar actress who was quite possibly the best of her time. I mean, she was giving like look at like Of Human Bondage from 1934. Like that performance, while it might seem a little theatrical these days, is still very fresh and vibrant compared to most of the other work that was happening around her. If you've not seen Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, I would recommend, first of all, I would recommend you watch it, but also there is a scene where she sings her vaudevillian song as part of a comeback in her living room, complete with like a row of stage lights on the floor to mimic that. And she hires a pianist played by the very eccentric Victor Buono, and who did get an Oscar nomination for this as well. So Betty Davis sings I've Written a Letter to Daddy. And it's sort of hilarious, it's sort of sad, it's sort of creepy, and she sells it well because she's Betty Davis. Do I think she should have won the Oscar? If she had, it would have been well deserved, but honestly, Anne Bancroft deserved it too. Lee Remick was also worthy. And also, not to mention, Geraldine Page, who was in Sweet Bird of Youth, was also very good, although maybe my least favorite in the category. But there is one other actress that I might actually consider voting for, and she's coming up later on this list, so I will save it for that. But at number 9, we have another French New Wave film, but this one's from a director that I've already expressed that I'm not as passionate about as some of the other French New Wave directors, and that is Jean-Luc Godard. But this is Vivre sa vie at number 9. And so we have actress Anna Karenina. She's roughly around 22 years of age. And she asks for a divorce from her husband and even gives up custody of her child because she wants to go off and have like this fancy career. But instead, she ends up in prostitution. Now, one could argue that Godard is being a little bit judgmental. Well, I've heard some people say that this film is almost like, well, if only the woman stayed at home. But honestly, that's not fair at all. In fact, I would still say that this performance by Anna Karenina is one of the best of that time period. It's a performance that doesn't get talked about enough. I love her work in this. And despite its problems, and I do have a lot of problems with Godard most of the time, this is his best work. And I do think it's the one that I would probably recommend most for people to see. And then at number 8, are you ready to just eat the rich and watch them suffer? I know I am. So here we go. Louis Buñuel's The Exterminating Angel. So, this one, as he often was to do, we watch a group of ritzy rich people in a mansion. They're going to have dinner. Everything is lovely. But then all of a sudden, none of them can leave the mansion. They're stuck there. And this group of one percenters turns into some sort of psychotic Lord of the Flies scenario. And it's definitely like, it's cynical and it's dark, but it's also very funny. And I really appreciate the energy that Buñuel had done. Like, basically, he loved. I think of like Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, which we'll seeing in the '70s. But yes, I do feel like Exterminating Angel is a great example of a watch the rich suffer and love it. Sort of like that mentality that people used to have about the primetime soaps of the '80s, like, oh, let's turn on Dallas and watch the Ewings. Who's going to get shot this week? Or you turn on Dynasty and it's like, ooh, which Carrington's going to fall into the lily pond or fall down the stairs? I mean, is Joan Collins going to pull into Evan's hair? Like, I would say that these films have a level of class that those shows did not, but there is that sort of fun, delicious mentality there. Now, at number 7 is quite possibly one of the more famous films on this list that a lot of you probably have definitely seen, and that is John Frankenheimer's The Manchurian Candidate. There's a lot that I could say about this film, but I want to single out one aspect of it, and it's probably one that most people do tend to single out, and that's Angela Lansbury. Now, these days, I feel like Angela Lansbury, may she rest in peace, was mostly known for her work as Jessica Fletcher on Murder, She Wrote. That's how I discovered her as a kid, because that show ran for so long. And but she also had an extensive career in musical theater. Like, she won Tonys for playing Mame, and also she was in Deer World, and also Sweeney Todd, and oh yes, she was Rose in Gypsy, the first revival of Gypsy. But in this role, she proves what an amazing dramatic actress she is. Because not only is she the complete opposite of someone, say, the voice work she did as Mrs. Potts in Beauty and the Beast, she is a dark, psychotic bitch. But it's a truly effective performance. And for many years, she used to say that she resented the fact that she lost the Oscar to Patty Duke for The Miracle Worker. Here's the problem with awards. Sometimes there are those years where people are equally great. And while I would say Patty Duke is at that level, there was something just so captivating about what Lansbury did in this role as Eleanor Iceland. I feel like when I first saw it, I was not used to her in that capacity. So it was a very great lesson on like what actors are capable of if they've been typecast as something else. But if we're going to talk about an actress who surprised me and is one that I feel like gets a lot of praise, but I'm not as passionate about, that would be Katharine Hepburn. But I did allude to you earlier that there would be an actress I haven't mentioned yet that might have gotten my vote for Best Actress that year. which is Katharine Hepburn, and that was for Sidney Lumet's adaptation of Eugene O'Neill's Long Day's Journey into Night. Long Day's Journey into Night was Eugene O'Neill's magnum opus. He wrote it based on his family's life, but he was adamant that it never be published or be seen. It was locked away. It was said that maybe after, I think it was like 25 years after his death, it could be like taken out of like a trust. But his widow was like, no, we need to get this published and like put up. I mean, and yes, that went against his wishes, but thank God they did, because Long Day's Journey into Night is a masterpiece. I do feel like the film is very good. Also, I think the film benefits from the fact that they use O'Neill's text. It's not like they brought someone in to like adapt it like crazy. But Katharine Hepburn as Mary Tyrone, this is, in my opinion, her best work. She has like a lot of her Hepburn tendencies, but she also just feels very raw. Because as a lot of you may know, the character of Mary has a morphine addiction, and she's just incredibly frail. She's bitter and like just cynical. She resents like her children, her husband. It's just a very dark film. But the thing about O'Neill, and a lot of productions I've seen of this play have not focused a lot on the humor, but there is humor in Long Day's Journey Tonight. Like I think about how much Mary wants to like constantly knock her home. Jessica Lange, I saw Jessica Lange play this role on Broadway, and I do love how she nailed those moments. Because for something like Long Day's Journey into Night, you need a little bit of levity because it's a 4 hour like tragedy essentially. But I will say that is quite possibly my favorite Katharine Hepburn performance. And I do think she would have gotten my vote had I been voting that year. But that is a very hard category. I mean, basically all of them were worthy. Now, at number 5, we have a debut film of a very fantastic director who would go on to make some very trippy and confusing films, to put it mildly. And that's Andrei Tarkovsky, and his debut film was Ivan's Childhood. So I would say that Ivan's Childhood is relatively accessible in the sense that it doesn't feel as much like a Tarkovsky film would feel. Like, think about something like Solaris or Mirror or Stalker. Like, those films are just baffling and just experimental and avant garde. Whereas Ivan's Child is based on an existing material, and it's about a young boy who is orphaned during World War II and his parents are killed. And we're basically following his life amidst the horrors of World War II. And while Tarkovsky was understandably not happy with how it turned out, it's a pretty darn good debut. I mean, some directors do come roaring out of the gate. Like I keep talking about like Truffaut with 400 Blows, or Ray with Pather Panchali, or even like someone like Steven Soderbergh. I think Sex, Lies, and Videotape is Soderbergh's best film to this day. So, and I'm not saying that Ivan's Childhood is Tarkovsky's best film by any means, but it is a very great film. I've only not seen one film of Tarkovsky's, and that was actually his final film, The Sacrifice, which I need to fix. But he never made a bad film because he died shortly after he made The Sacrifice. But yes, I do have to commend him for such a fantastic debut. Don't get mad at me. But at number 4, we have the film that most people consider one of the finest of all time, but I only have it at number 4, and that is David Lean's magnum epic, Lawrence of Arabia. I can't deny the film is stunning to look at. The fact that it was even made at that time, the scope of it, it's like David Lean took a wide, vast canvas that's stunning, just like colossal, and yet the most intimate character study at the same time. So you have Peter O'Toole as T.E. Lawrence, and he is a man who's rather full of himself, But the film is basically a cynical look at the British rule in Arabia. And I mean, the film does drag a little bit. I'm not going to deny that. I can't say that I love the film in the sense that I want to sit down and watch it all the time, but I have to admire the craftsmanship behind it. I mean, it's not my favorite David Lean film. In fact, I would say my favorite David Lean film is Brief Encounter, which is the complete opposite of Lawrence of Arabia in that regard. But I don't feel like I want to say much about Lawrence of Arabia because I feel like it's also like one of those films that just so many people have seen or know about. Besides, I'm a little more excited and just sad to talk about this next one because I did allude to it in my last video. But at number three, we have the final film of Yasuhiro Ozu, and that is An Autumn Afternoon. Ozu was only 60 when he died, and I do feel like this film is one of his best. And the interesting thing about it is that Setsuko Hara, who was his muse, was actually not in this one. But there were some of his regulars that were in this. But this is a film where you have it's which one is it? Shisu Ryu? I think I said that right. So she plays Shuhei, who's a widow. She has three children. But there's another daughter, the 24-year-old younger daughter, Michiko, who's still single. But the father, in true Anna Tevka fashion, is wanting to arrange a marriage for her because, yet again, Ozu loved to tackle these, like, let's just have the patriarchy just lord right in. But, I mean, that's what he did best. I mean, he was a director who did zero in on the similar themes quite a bit. But there's just something that was so honest and human and genuine and just raw about what Ozu was able to accomplish. I treasure a lot of his work. Ozu is a filmmaker that I wish we could have someone like today. And there are directors I think you could argue have a similar energy to him. I think of Kelly Reichardt, for example, even though I'm not the biggest fan of her work, but she does have this slow, like melodic plotting pacing to her films that can work for others, not for other people. I get baffled at times talking about Ozu, at least off the cuff, because he something about his work just deeply spoke to me on a similar level that Bergman's did. And it's why I probably would consider him my favorite filmmaker after Bergman, because I just really love his gentle hand. Now, at number two, we're going to go to another Japanese film, but this one is not as light. Not that An Autumn Afternoon was light, but we have Masaki Kobayashi's Harakiri. This one, as of this taping, is the number one film on Letterboxd, like the top 250. And the film deals with a veteran who's more or less lost everything good in his life. And then he comes across this house, this mansion, but the mission is that he wants to basically find someone to help him commit like a harakiri, a ritualistic suicide. And then the film just descends into a lovely array of fun. No, obviously, no. No, it does not. It's hard to truly convey the experience that like a lot of these post-war Japanese films have because Kobayashi was very savage in a lot of his work. You could argue Kurosawa tapped into a little bit of that. Teshigahara was a little more like brutal. And then you had the people like Ozu or Naruse who were more genteel and domestic. I would say that Japan has an amazing roster from over the years. Now, at number one, we have another French New Wave outing here. Now, some of you might be wondering, really, you're gonna like rank Lawrence of Arabia and Harakiri at something other than number one, but you're gonna give this film number one? Yes, I am. And that is Agnes Varda's Cleo from 5 to 7. I saw this film back in early 2004. For a little bit of context, I was a freshman in high school, and this was around the award season when Sofia Coppola was gaining attention for Lost in Translation. And when she was going to get nominated for Best Director, which seemed pretty likely, she was going to be only the first American woman to do so, and only the third overall after Lena Wertmuller and Jane Campion. Now, Sofia Coppola didn't win because that was the year Peter Jackson won for Return of the King, but Sofia Coppola did win for original screenplay. But the reason I bring that up is because at the time, there were people online who were talking about other great female filmmakers who never really got a lot of significant attention in the US. And, or maybe like weren't super well known out of certain circles. Because I grew up in West Virginia, I didn't have a lot of immediate culture around me. I was lucky to have a local library where they had a film curator who kept a lot of amazing selections there, and that's how I got to see a lot of these foreign films at a young age. But I was recommended to check out films by Varda and also Chantal Akerman, who will come up along in the 70s when I get to that decade. But Cleo from 5 to 7 is a very simple premise. You have a woman, a singer named Cleo, who is awaiting the results of a biopsy because she may have stomach cancer. And we kind of follow her on this sort of like weird journey in Paris as she's waiting to get these results. And it's a very short film, it's only like an hour and a half long. But I just, something about it just really shook me. Just the energy of it, the quietness of it, it just felt very unique to any film I had seen at that time. In fact, it might have even been the first film of the French New Wave that I would have seen, because I don't think I even saw 400 Blows yet at that point. Maybe not. I don't remember. That's besides the point. But anyways, I wish that Varda could still be with us. She did die at the age of 90 back in 2019, so that's not really a shock. But I really admired Varda, her fictional films, but she was an amazing, amazing documentarian. Just, and I do really long to get, I have not bought her, the collection that Criterion made of her like complete works. I would love to have that because she was such a trailblazer for women in film. I also love how much she did curate the legacy of her husband's work because her husband was Jacques Demy, who was behind such films as The Umbrellas of Cherbourg and The Young Girls of Roquefort and Donkey Skin. And I do love that she was very much wanting to keep his legacy alive, even to the point that she made Jacques de Notte about his life growing up in France. So, with that in mind, we're going to come to an end with this one. I hope that this wasn't too much of a trial for you to watch because, as I've learned, I'm apparently someone who talks too much, but I wanted to get this video out. And I do have 1963 coming up, but I will say I'm very excited for 1964. And I will warn you that might be a pretty long video because I have a lot to talk about with that year. So, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.